All right, welcome to another sort of episode of the Comic Watchers. I'm Chad, and today we have a very special guest. Barry Kitson is here to talk about one of my favorite series of all times, Empire, which is currently funding over on Zoop. Um, so, how's it going, Barry?
Uh, Going very well, thanks. But,
Um, no, good. Glad to hear. Before we get started talking about the book and everything else, I like to kind of hear your comic book origin. When did you start reading comics? Do you remember the first one, and how did that lead into your career?
well, I started reading American comics, I think, when I was about 6 or 7. And I think the very first one I saw, a friend had got hold of it, and it was the Wedding of Yellow Jacket and the Wasp. And that was the first one. I think that was the first one I ever saw, although occasionally I picked up black and white reprints of some of the old sort of Marvel horror stories and things when I was on holiday. But they used to be collected in anthologies, like the short stories. So I remember the first story, In the Ant Hill, which sort of led on to Ant-Man being created after that. But as soon as I saw American comics, I just loved the art and the way the stories were paced, because it was so different from British comics at the time, which tended to be just 2-3 page stories with maybe 12, 16 panels on a page. And so once I'd seen them, I just started collecting them whenever I could, which was usually when trips to the seaside, because American comics used to come over as ballast on freighters, and they would just come over in no order whatsoever and just be distributed to local news agents. So you could literally go in one week and get, I don't know, Avengers #1, and next week it'd be Avengers 64. And so you had all the fun of, and most other English creators who ended up being part of the British invasion said the same thing. It kind of made it even more fun collecting comics, because you never knew what you could actually collect.
Mhm.
And so that's when I started collecting comics. And from probably when I was about 8 years old, I wanted to be a comic artist. But I never really imagined it was actually going to happen. But things kind of went from that beginning. Yeah.
So let's talk about your early career. How did you kind of get started? How did you break in? And
Well, I was very lucky. I had just been drawing for my own amusement, and I can't remember why now, but I left some of my drawings with the local comic shop owner, and one of his other customers was John Stokes, who was a very well-known British artist and was working on things like Warrior at the time. And he left his phone number there and told me to get in touch. I went over and visited him, showed him my work, and he was kind enough to give me editors' phone numbers and said I could use his name as a reference. And so I did that. I went down to Marvel UK and showed them my work, and which they liked, and they said, what have you had published? And I said, well, I haven't had anything published yet. And they said, well, when you have, come back, because we only use published artists. So I said, well, how does that work? If everywhere I go says that, how do you ever get first work? And they said, well, that's just our policy. But by pure happenstance, they had a member of staff leaving that night, and they said, oh, we're going to have a party. Why don't you come along to that? And which I did. And in the meantime, I'd said to them, well, maybe you could send me an old script, one that somebody had already drawn, which I could practice on, because I'd never seen an actual script at this point. And they said they would. So I went to the party, I went home. A few weeks passed, no script turned up. So I rang up and said, oh, could I just remind you that you were going to send me a script? And they said, oh, well, the editor you saw isn't here anymore. He's moved on as a new editor. You'll have to come and meet him. So I went back to London again, excuse me. And in those days, Marvel was a big open office where everybody could see each other. And I walked in, and for some reason, everyone remembered me from this party. And I walked in, and everybody was going, "Oh, Barry, good to see you again." And I sat down with the new editor, who had only been there like a week or so, I think. And he said, he looked at my work, and he said, "Well, the only thing I can offer you at the moment is Spider-Man. Would you be interested?" So obviously I said yes. And he said, "Okay, here's the script. Go away, draw the first 2 pages. If I like them, you've got the job." And so at the time, they were doing English original episodes of Spider-Man, written by Mike Collins, and he drew half of them, and all of them were inked by Mark Farmer. So my first artwork was inked by Mark Farmer, who obviously was way ahead of me at that time and made me look great. The editor told me sort of afterwards, he thought when I walked in, everybody knew me. Oh gosh, I must give him some work. Everybody knows him. And so that was how I lucked into my first job.
Well, let's flash forward a few years, and let's kind of jump into Empire, which one of your projects with Mark Waid. First off, for the people who may not have heard it, and heaven forbid they shouldn't, give us an idea or tell us what the premise of Empire is.
Well, it's something which has been followed up on by other people, but at the time when we did it, I'm pretty sure it was the very first comic in which the bad guy had actually won. And Mark's tells this story is that he looked in the mirror one day and thought to himself, he'd achieved everything he wanted to achieve. He was writing Superman, blah blah blah. What am I going to do now? And it just occurred to him, oh, what would the bad guy do if he achieved everything he set out to achieve? And was in the situation where he basically conquered the world and defeated anybody who'd stood against him. And what was left for him to do? And that's sort of the premise of where it starts. And the focus is really not entirely on Golgoth. It's spread more around the coterie of lieutenants he has around him, and he runs his empire a little bit in the way historically Hitler tried to run the Third Reich, by just allowing all his lieutenants to fight against each other and have rivalries and fight for survival. And that's kind of what all our characters are trying to do.
So how did you get involved with the project? Did Mark approach you? And what was it about the project that appealed to you, and when made you want to kind of get on board?
Yeah, Mark approached me. We'd already been working together for quite some time, and we had a good working relationship. And at the time, he and several other writers mainly, had been trying to set up an independent company which was going to be called Gorilla. And he invited me to be part of that. He told me the premise. I liked it, and so I was happy to jump on board. Unfortunately, Gorilla wasn't funded in the way we were told it was going to be funded, which led to a lot of complications down the line. But at least we got a lot of good projects off the ground there.
So what was it about the story pitch of Empire that piqued your interest and made you want to be a part of it?
Well, the premise itself was intriguing. I've always kind of been drawn to darker characters. Obviously, working with Mark was a big thing. and always I love being able to design my own worlds that I'm drawing, and so to create this world from scratch completely was a big plus.
And how much, it was Mark's story, but how much, input did you have into, character designs, world designs? Because as you said, it sounds like something that you're very interested in doing.
Well, one of the ways Mark and I work is we don't work story and art. We cross over, and the only things Mark doesn't actually draw, and I don't. I might suggest dialogue, but I never override him on dialogue. So we co-plotted everything together and created characters together. So it was a chance to create characters that we found intriguing.
Did you have a favorite character, either in design or just one that you enjoyed, drawing?
Well, yeah, I mean, the obvious one for me to say would be Zana. But I actually was more intrigued with Grease, who's a bit more less upfront a character. But yeah, I like them all. I mean, I think Mark's favorite was LeCullen because he screws up the language so much of the time. But I kind of like them all. I mean, there weren't any characters I didn't like. Put it that way. I mean, sometimes you work on a series and there's one person you don't really want to draw, but when you get to design them all, you can't really complain that you don't want to draw any.
Now, I know that you and Mark did JLA Year One, which is another one of my favorite series. How was it? How did the two projects compare? Because one, you have, characters that you have a certain sandbox that you have to play in, and then the Empire it's your sandbox.
Yeah, well, like Empire was kind of like our. Trying to think of a good analogy. It was our vision of how something could be. JLA Year One was more our revisiting our youth and the love we had for those characters and they were as they read them. I mean, for me, like I said, I wanted to draw comics when I was about 8 years old. But to actually get to draw those characters as they were when I was that age, made it, particularly special for me. Because, obviously in the 20 or 30 years between when I was a little kid and I was actually a professional artist, a lot of those characters moved on. But to actually be able to draw them as they were, was very, very special. And we did kind of the same thing at Marvel as well when we did the Avengers 4, when we set the whole series in between 2 issues of the Avengers from the 60s. We're comic nerds.
Oh, not Mark Waid. Come on. The first time I saw him was in Baltimore, and he was on a panel with Ramona Fradon, and they were just talking about Metamorpho, and it was a fun conversation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Mark is. I remember the stories the artists are created, blah blah blah. But Mark can actually tell you what adverts were in a comic. If you sort of said, "Oh, Flash 37," you go, "Oh yeah, there was an advert on the back for blah 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 and blah blah blah." I mean, he's that steeped in it.
So, how did your career before Empire prepare you for that project?
Well, I'm trying to remember the order in which I did things. I mean, I'd spent a long time on Legion, so I was used to doing it book, and I was used to doing a world separate from continuity, basically. So that set me up pretty well. And I've been lucky enough to work on some of the most iconic characters, so I wasn't fazed by the idea of taking responsibility for something. I guess it was probably the culmination of what I wanted to do from when I was that little kid. I mean, when I was 10 or 11 years old, I was doing a daily cartoon strip, which I was pinning on the school notice board, which I'd written and drawn very much in the style of Gil Kane, as I remember. But it was a sci-fi superhero thing, so I'd come full circle to it, to just where I wanted to be when I was a preteen.
So, who are your influences and how?
Oh.
Sorry, this is a two-part question, so I apologize. Who are your influences and how has your style over the years been influenced by them?
Well, I have so many influences. I mean, initially it was Jack Kirby, and I just thought every character drawn by Jack looked better than it drawn by anybody else. And then Neil Adams came along, and he was a very big influence. And I was incredibly lucky to have met both of those guys in my lifetime and actually become pretty good friends with Neil. Jim Steranko is another big influence. Wally Wood, Nick Cardy, Carmen Infantino, Gil Kane, just Gene Colan. I'm always going to forget this. I hate saying favorites. I'm always going to get started. But basically, I was influenced by anyone whose work I liked, because I had literally no art training at all. All my art knowledge came from reading the comics and copying them, basically. And all through the years, I continue to be influenced by people. So, in more modern times, people like Mike Mignola, Bill Sienkiewicz, Kevin Nolan, other people I became friends with, like Mike Kaluta. Just everybody whose work I like, I study. And Mike Carlin, when I was working on Superman, said I was the most studious artist he'd ever worked with. He'd never known anybody spend so much time analyzing stuff. And but I don't honestly know. It's hard for me to say how it's affected my work, because I always think it has affected it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have a day I'll get up and think, okay, I'm gonna draw like Kevin Nolan today, and then I'll show it to my wife or friends or whatever, and yeah, it just looks like you. And I'll think I've done this great job of mimicking someone else, and I obviously haven't. In recent times, I've got a lot more influenced by sort of the golden age of illustration. Rockwell, Lion Decker, even Charles Robinson, Edmund Dulac. So I've kind of spread out. I'm not as influenced by many current comic artists as I used to be. There are exceptions. Usually my friends, like Izad Ribbit is an influence. He just told me to use a bigger brush, as indeed did Brian Selfries. But yeah, I think it's always a learning curve, and I like to think I'm learning as I go along.
So let's get into the nitty gritty of your work. I assume you were traditionally, or have you kind of moved over to a more hybrid?
I'm almost entirely traditional now. I had a couple of years round about the time I was working at Marvel on Spider-Man, FF, and a couple of other things, where I did a lot of digital inking. But it wasn't honestly saving me any time, and I didn't have any physical result to show at the end of it. And more recently, I've been doing a lot more watercolor work, and I'm really enjoying I get more satisfaction out of the physical results and the interaction with the materials you're using than I do digitally. I have not, I perfectly respect everybody who does work digitally. It's just it's not the same for me. I don't get the same satisfaction out of a lovely pen stroke or a brush stroke or whatever if I do it on a tablet, because you can always Control Z it and do it again. When you physically, you get that kind of added thrill of the danger of you could mess it up, and
then maybe if you mess it up, you have to work it in, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's very true. A lot of people say, a mistake is just a happy opportunity that you didn't know you were going to make.
So you've had the opportunity to work on a lot of properties from both companies. Is there maybe one that you haven't worked on that you would like to, perhaps?
The one that springs to mind is Daredevil, because I always enjoyed Daredevil, and I loved Wally Wood's run on it in particular. And I did have a script for a Daredevil story to go in the Marvel Fanfare, but before I got to draw it, I was offered regular books, and so it never got done. And I've never had the chance to draw a Daredevil adventure since then. So he feels like the one that got away to me.
And is there a creator that you would like to collaborate with?
Oh yeah, I'm it's an almost endless list. I mean, I've been very lucky in the people I have been able to work with, but there's, you can name every single person who's written a story that I've liked that I haven't worked with. I would like to have worked with. And when I've had the opportunity to ink other artists, I've always enjoyed that as well. I'd like to have that opportunity more often. David Mack and I have been suggesting we might collaborate on something together. That's recently, and that would be a lot of fun.
Sold.
Thank you.
Take my money.
Honestly, I mean, I still feel like I'm very much that kid who just wanted to get into this industry and enjoy it, and I still feel that way. I get very excited every chance I get to work with these guys who are my heroes. I mean, it's even though I know I know a lot of them are my contemporaries, I still find it hard to believe that we're contemporaries. It's like I always feel like I'm the kind of imposter in the room.
Well, I guess kind of taking a thread out of that, having been in the industry, for a while now, how do you feel that it's changed? Is it for the better, for the worse?
No, that's a difficult one to say. It's certainly changed. It's not the same industry that I wanted to get into when I was a kid. It's moved on from that, obviously. But there's so many more opportunities now. There's so many more curator-owned books than there were. When I got into the industry, I don't know. There were probably less creator-owned books than you had fingers on your hand. Whereas now, a lot of my favorite titles are creator-owned books. They're brought out by Image or other companies like that, and the range of possibilities, I think, is much wider now than it was. It's just different. It's hard to say. I mean, I don't want to be. I certainly don't want to be one of these old guys like, oh, it was better in my day. But,
and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, so.
No, it's not a problem. I'm just trying to give an honest answer, and I mean, for me, the time I was at DC, sort of in the late 80s, early 90s, feels like a kind of golden era to me. The way we were treated by DC with Paul and Jeanette in charge was always fair, always positive, always creative. I can't speak for the industry as much now, but I know, then, those guys were putting the comics first and foremost, and they were putting creators' opportunities first and foremost. I'm slightly less in the mainstream anymore, and sort of all the better for not feeling that pressure every day, I think, as I approach my old age. But I think the industry as a whole seems pretty healthy.
So were there any lessons that or skills that you learned while you were working on Empire that you have brought forward, into your current career?
Okay, it's difficult to remember exactly. I think it was on Empire when I first started using scans and blue lines, which I'm pretty sure I was one of the first people to do, and that made a big difference in the way of just the process of working. Can't think of anything in particular. I mean, Mark and I were trying to sort of push the barriers a little bit on Empire. I mean, some of the content was not the kind of thing that was generally being published at the time. Structure of the story was slightly different, I think. But yeah, it's difficult when you're looking back that far to think exactly what it was. Sorry, I'm not a very good interviewee, am I? It's like,
No. I understand it. It was just curious.
No, I feel bad because I've been watching music, because I play a bit of guitar, and I've been watching some musical industries, and I've seen musicians who can tell you exactly what they did and what they did and why they did it in a guitar solo they played 30 years ago, and I think, I can't remember what notes I played in the guitar solo 2 days ago.
Has your love of music and guitar, does that influence your art, or both ways?
Yes, it did. I'm not sure if it's a big influence, but I was certainly influenced by a lot of the Fillmore posters of the 70s, people like Rick Griffin, and it's influenced what I'm doing now. I mean, I do artwork for a lot of my heroes now, from the musical world. I do T-shirts and posters for Fairport Convention, doing stuff for a band called Griffin. I don't want to name drop too much, because I've got some stuff in the future with some quite famous people that are, were heroes of mine that I'm going to be doing as well. So yeah, I feel like I've been very lucky with that. I used to throw in musical references into stories quite a lot. In Empire, there is one very obvious reference to a very famous American band, but I won't give it away. I'll let people they can find it for themselves.
I will have to look through that when I do my reread. I try to. No, it's one of the series that I try to read every year, every other year, just
Oh, that's
to kind
incredibly
of,
nice. Thank you.
because it's that kind of story on. I'm going to say it's on par with Watchmen in my book.
Thank you. Thank you. Just tell Dave Gibbons that.
So
Yeah, Dave and I are good friends, but we hate to say anything nice about each other. It's the British way.
yep. So I know that Empire is kind of, there was the original series, and then there was another short series. But is it kind of done or
Well,
completed?
since we've been doing this launch, we've gone back to talking about it again, and there is at least one more issue that Mark's already typed out the plot for me for. I mean, we'll see how things go with this. I mean, we would both like to finish it off, but it's a matter of practicalities, really. Mark is so busy these
Oh,
days.
he's not busy. He's not like he's writing like 10 million books or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we would like to have finished it off. I mean, we had it sort of plotted out as a second arc as big as the first one. But again, this is an industry, and sometimes logistics get in the way, and that was kind of what happened with us on that. Again, I'm trying to remember the exact circumstance of it, but we were being published by IDW, and for one reason or another, it seemed like nobody knew it was being published, and it got pretty frustrating. It shows, when you do conventions, people he can say, "Oh, when are you going to do some more Empire?" It's like, well, we are. It got pretty frustrating. It just people, the word, for some reason, the word just didn't seem to get out. And, but I guess that's the risk you do with anything creative.
So the project or the book is funding on Zoop. Were you involved in any of the planning on bringing it to the Zoop platform, or are you surprised by the response that it's generated?
I'm very pleased by the response. I got involved at the beginning, yeah, and so I volunteered a lot of the rewards to go with it, and I'll be doing, I think, 85 remarks for people who buy that edition. I've done a new cover for the hardcover, so slipcase. Sorry, not the dust jacket, and also another new piece of artwork for the slipcase for people who buy that. And it's been a really nice opportunity to revisit the characters. Unlike you, I don't read it as often as you did, and it was, it's very rarely I go back to my old work and usually I look back at it and think, oh, I could have done that better, I could have done this better, blah blah blah. But I reread an Empire, I was like, we did a pretty good job there, I think. And so I'm very proud of it. Very proud of it.
Now, this isn't your first experience with crowdfunding, is it?
Yeah, I think it is actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We've been talking about doing an art book for years, but never having the time and the organization to get around to doing it. But one day.
Okay. Well, is there anything else about the series, your career, or the industry that you want to make sure that you get to tell people?
Well, I nothing in particular. I just hope in my career, I've managed to make it obvious how grateful I am to everybody who's supported my work and been very nice to me over the years, because literally I have lived the dream I had as a little kid, and I don't think many people get to do that. And I've worked on so many iconic characters. I hope the joy that I take in it comes out through my work. That's the main thing I'd like to get across. I mean, even if you don't like what I do, at least I hope you'll say, well, he obviously likes what he's doing, poor old chap, But
So, are there any projects that you're currently working on that you can mention? Not, or
I've just done 3 variant covers for another friend, for Liam Sharp's Starhenge second series, which is coming out. I think the first issue comes out next month. That's been a lot of fun. I am doing a new cover for Legion of Superheroes Omnibus, which DC said I am allowed to say that, but I'm not allowed to show anybody what it looks like. What else am I doing? I'm working on the second volume. Actually, now that you mention it, I guess I was involved in another crowdfunding project, although I didn't have anything to do with the crowdfunding. That was the Liberty Brigade, which was a very long story about using all the characters, Golden Age characters, that are no longer licensed to anyone else. And Ron Friends drew some of it. George Perez was involved. Jim Stranko was involved. Alan Davis, Dougie Braithwaite, loads of other people who I can't. Far too many for me to remember everybody. So I'll stop before I just leave one person out and they get hurt. But I'm working on the second volume of that. I've penciled and inked 50 pages so far, and it's probably going to run to about 100 pages, I think, and there will be a third volume to follow this up as well.
Well, I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to chat. And I know we connected on Facebook about a year ago, and I kind of saw something shiny, and we were able to do it. And I have enjoyed, as I probably you can tell by my gushing, I've enjoyed your work and everything that you've done and brought to the industry. And where can people find more from you? Or
well, I have a Facebook group called Barry Kitson Art, which I try and post something to every day and try and encourage people to get involved in. We have a suggestions list every month where anyone can suggest a character they'd like to see me paint or draw. And
Animal Man.
And yes, I basically, my lovely wife takes all the names off all the suggestions, so I can't be biased, and I just pick characters at random and try and do my version of those, which has been quite eye-opening, really. It's been nice for me, because I'd never heard of Calvin and Hobbes until it's just not a British thing. I don't think it's ever been published over here, and somebody suggested I draw them, and I absolutely loved it. And I've now read every strip that was published. And so it takes me out of my comfort zone and gets me to do some interesting things, and it's good fun. And if you suggest a character I draw, you get first dibs on if you want to buy the piece. There's no obligation. But if you did suggest it, you get the first chance to buy it if you want to. If not, it just goes up for open to anyone else. So that's on Facebook, and also I'm on Instagram under the same address. It's Barry Kitson Art. I don't actually deal with the Instagram page. My wife does that for me. Facebook's about as technological as I get, and which I know isn't saying much. But yeah, that's the easiest place to find us.
All right. Well, I really enjoyed our chat, and would love to in the
Great.
future. If whenever you have something else coming out that you would like to promote, then I would love to chat with you again and
Try to remember
catch
to
up.
get in touch when the next volume of Liberty Brigade's coming out.
All righty. Well, have a good day. Keep drawing, and thank you for all you've done.
My pleasure. Thank you, Chad.